Now, since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the Hungarian leader has dragged his feet in European efforts to supply Kyiv with badly needed military and financial aid needed to fend off an imperialistic Russia. Now the NATO member wants to redefine the country's relationship with the alliance as to not take part in any operations outside the territory of NATO. Now, to explore the details of such disruptive behavior, we are joined by Benjamin Tallis, Senior Research Fellow on the German Council of Foreign Relations. Hello and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today on TVP World. Now, Viktor Orban wants to redefine the nature of Hungary's relationship with NATO. Is this, first of all, legally possible, and what could be the knock-on effects if so?
Well, I'm sure there's quite a few countries within the alliance who would welcome Hungary redefining its relationship with NATO, to be quite honest. It's been a thorn in the side of alliance unity for a long time. It's seen as something of a Trojan horse for authoritarians, not least for Russia, but also to an extent for China within our leading security alliance. And so there's a big question about how much Hungary actually belongs there. Now, if Hungary is taking the proactive step to reconsider its relation, it might actually solve other NATO countries' problem. It might save them a headache, in fact. There's, of course, commitments that you sign up to when you're part of NATO, but how you respond to individual missions or how you respond even to an Article 5 request is up to member states. So there is a distinct possibility that this relationship could, in fact, be reordered or reconfigured to suit what Viktor Orban thinks are Hungarian voters' needs. And frankly, it might well suit the needs of everyone else, too.
So maybe a win-win.
Well, precisely. And on the back of that, if this is the relationship, the tensions between NATO and Hungary are such, does NATO actually need Hungary at this point?
Well, yes and no. It certainly doesn't need its political attitude. It certainly doesn't need the zero contribution it's making to Ukraine's security. But of course, it is still in alliance territory, and supplies to Ukraine have been passing through Hungary during the course of the full-scale war. They haven't actually been blocked by the Hungarian government. There's also, from a defense industrial point of view, a lot of cooperation between German industry in particular and Hungarian manufacturers, and there are weapons manufacturing sites and arms manufacturing sites on Hungarian territory. So there would be a few eggs that would need to be unscrambled. And of course, it would create a territorial question for the alliance, particularly in future if Ukraine were to join, because it would effectively create an island of an unaligned territory. Yet, nonetheless, we see that also with Switzerland within the alliance, even though Switzerland is not such a malign actor as Viktor Orban's Hungary. It would create questions, but I don't think it's beyond our wit to be able to answer them.
Certainly. Now, concerning European Union unity, the same goes. Hungary constantly blocks or holds up crucial aid for Ukraine, which costs lives. What should the European Union do?
Well, the EU needs to get serious about upholding its own rules and upholding its values, and in fact, the very reasons why it exists as an organization. And Hungary has again been consistently a violator of those principles. It's been consistently a violator of EU rules. But it's only recently that any indication has come that the other EU member states are serious about actually enforcing what should be the code of the organization. And I think it's been quite clear the frustration that that's caused. Already back in 2022, Jan Lipavsky, the Czech foreign minister, said Hungary needs to choose sides. More recently, we've seen Gabrielius Landsbergis of Lithuania, the foreign minister there, openly expressing his frustration with the Orban regime and with the foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó, and urging his EU partners to actually get serious about dealing with what is a real problem that could set a really bad precedent within Europe and which fundamentally undermines the EU's raison d'etre.
And then we have the issue of Article 7, which is something that Poland has been dealing with. Perhaps it's a matter of the past for Poland now. It's been closing that issue. But Hungary is in the midst of that, and obviously it will be taking on the rotating EU presidency. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to Hungary? Because it is a bit of a tricky situation.
Well, yes, the presidency issue actually also nicely illustrates this, is that the EU was basically built up as a club that relied on trust and relied on the goodwill of member states to actually uphold the principles they signed up to. And so it does, to a certain extent, lack some of the necessary enforcement mechanisms to police itself. Nonetheless, Article 7 is one of those mechanisms, and the question as to whether it's really fully being used to the extent which it could remains open. But of course, it requires unanimity from the other members to truly actually put the power of this into action. And there are questions around Slovakia, not questions anymore around Poland, as you mentioned, but it does raise the wider issue of how the EU actually deals with what are fundamentally political problems. It can't really hide behind those institutional frameworks that it itself created and say, well, we don't have the power to deal with this. It's a bit like saying, well, we followed the rules and burned the house down. No one's going to actually thank us for that in the future or even in the present. So there needs to be a proper discussion between EU leaders about how they politically enforce and in effect repoliticize the European Union in order to allow the Union to pursue the goals that it was set up to.
Right, but there's been a lot of taboo around the use of Article 7. I mean, we saw obviously, when Poland was in the same boat as Hungary, the two supported each other. I know there are questions as to whether which direction Slovakia would go. Would Slovakia go ahead and veto that decision if Article 7 was put to the test? But let's assume that it would not intervene. Are EU politicians willing to give it a shot?
It's a very good question, and it's a test for them, to be quite honest. Are we serious, actually, about upholding these values that we claim that our European Union stands for? Are we serious about actually summoning the political will to do something about this? And my suspicion is that for a lot of EU leaders at the moment, they're quite happy to hide in this restrictive comfort of legalism, to hide behind the rules and use them as an excuse, rather than actually get serious about the world that we're now in. But again, it is an acid test. If the European Union is going to be fit for purpose in the coming years and coming decades, this is something that they do need to solve. And so getting serious with Hungary on that and showing a signal to encourage the others, so to speak, creating a deterrent effect against future malpractice from EU states would be a powerful signal to send.
Indeed, it would. Well, Benjamin Tallis, Senior Research Fellow at the German Council on Foreign Relations, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you.